And we're back after a brief break. You're watching South Texas Crossfire with your host, Attorney Joe Flores. I've got a special guest on that's running to be your next judge. And of course, our signal reaches San Pat too. All my friends over there. Saludos a todos mis amigos que hablan nuestro idioma español también over there and also from my wife, who's a nurse who does home health visits out there in San Pat as well. And so I want to bring on Melissa Franco de Gonzales. She's running to be your next judge over there. Hi, Melissa. How are you this morning?
Hello, Mr. Flores. Thank you for having me here today.
Hey, well, I appreciate it. And, I've known your name for a long time because I think you've practiced law as long as I have or longer. And your husband, Frank, also a great lawyer. Where are you from? Tell us a little bit about your education, training, background.
Okay. I grew up in Sinton. It's actually a small town, St. Paul, that's right a little north of Sinton, but I went to school in Sinton. And as a student, I was involved in pretty much anything I could be involved in. I was in cross country, I played volleyball, basketball, ran track. I also, for extra money, there was a Walmart in Sinton growing up, so I worked part-time there. And of course, I was in CCD, and I helped Sacred Heart Church when I was there, volunteering with the kids, helping the younger kids in CCD, and I was a lector in church as well. I graduated in 1992. And then I moved to New York to go to Vassar College. And from South Texas going to New York.
Big cultural change.
It was a learning experience in and of itself. Once there, though, it was fantastic. I got to meet folks from all over the country. And of course, the professors were fantastic. I also had a number of opportunities to help and grow and learn. I tutored kids from disadvantaged communities. I also was able to student teach in New York City. And I did that at an elementary school there, public school. And then my junior year, I went abroad to Spain, and actually there I tutored Spaniards to speak English for extra money. And so I had a number of experiences there. I graduated, finished my requirements for college a little early, in 3.5 years, so I could go back home and save some money and earn some money for a graduate degree. So I went back home and began working in Sinton and in Beeville as a juvenile probation officer and a detention officer. I started off as a detention officer and then probation officer. So that was for the 36th Judicial District there. And I had a number of cases, like over 30 at some point. So I learned a lot from that experience, but after about a year, I decided it was time to go back to school and moved back to New York and went to law school at the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law. And that law school also was fantastic. A number of students I learned from, professors, and the best part of it was I had a number of invaluable experiences. For example, I got to work with a New York State Supreme Court judge who ended up being my mentor throughout law school. And I also worked with the Federal Trade Commission, the Environmental Protection Agency, and I also was privileged to get a certification as a New York State mediator. And I mediated cases in New York City and in Brooklyn before graduating.
I hear, Ivy League. I hear New York. I hear Cardozo School of Law. For those that aren't in law, it's an excellent school. Why come back to South Texas?
It's where I'm from. It's my roots, and family is super important to me. And I don't have any family in the Northeast. I just felt it was important to go off and learn. I always knew that I was going to come back.
When you talk about your background and your law training, and you were an officer of the court before was it detention officer?
Yes, I was a detention officer, and then a probation officer, a position became available, so I applied for that, and then I worked there. But then I went to law school, and actually my first job out of law school, I worked for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality in Austin, Texas. And I worked there in it was the permitting department for hazardous waste. And actually a local firm, after having been there for a little over a year, Hornblower, Manning and Ward, recruited me to come work on one of their environmental cases. And so, long story short, I ended up moving to Corpus, and I worked with that firm. I worked on environmental issues, employment issues, labor law, civil litigation, toxic torts, especially with silica litigation, and asbestos. And so I worked with them for a number of years, and here recently, almost 2 years ago, I began working with my husband at Gonzales Law Office, and I help him with family and civil and criminal matters.
Well, and you have a lovely family.
Thank you.
How old are your children?
I have a 6-year-old. Her name is Sophia, and she is at East Cliff at GPISD, Gregory Portland Independent School District. And I have a son. He's 8, and he's in 3rd grade, and also at East Cliff at GPISD.
That's a fun age, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm married to my college sweetheart, Frank Gonzales, who I
Yeah.
mentioned and you've mentioned before.
That's a fun age to have children. Do you feel the calling now? We were talking before we came on that San Pat is a conservative county, not like Oasis isn't, but there are those that say it's a hard county to get consensus on. What have you found the reality of it, campaigning and going out there and knocking on doors?
Well, for me, I'm running for a judicial position, and what I always tell folks is that the position I'm running for, it affects everyone locally, and it's important to elect someone that you know, not necessarily based on party lines. As a judge, you don't go up there and ask, are you Republican or are you Democrat?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, I tell folks, look, I grew up here, I'm from here, I care about the community, its future, and how the laws affect the community. I'm raising my kids here, in San Pat County. And that's important to me because in addition to working, in addition to campaigning, family is super important to me. And I work with my kids and I see, the folks in the community all the time, whether it's with my kids' soccer games or baseball games or, Sophia's dance or gymnastics classes, all of those things. I think that you make your decision upon who you want running the county court at law based upon the person. And I feel that I have the same family values and the same beliefs as the community.
Well, and we're seeing a shift from the Latino vote. Obviously is not something that anybody can take for granted anymore. There used to be La Palanca where they said they're going to vote a certain way, and now our generation, Generation X, and the millennials that are coming up are saying, well, I'm going to vote who I want to vote for. Mm-hmm. Likewise, the same thing on the Republican side is that I find that there's a good percentage that'll cross party lines. When you're, say we're addressing those people that are very conservative and they say, why should I vote for you instead of the opponent? What would you tell them?
Well, I have over 10 years of legal experience, and not only do I have legal experience, but I've been a student teacher, a detention officer, and a probation officer. And unlike my opponent, I bring a unique perspective to the bench in that I'm a wife and mother of 2 children who are active in the community. And I think that's important. And I'm also from the community. I have roots in every city. My husband and his family, they're from Mathis. I've been told that my husband would run around and play and work with his abuelito, abuelita at the Cielito Lindo in Mathis. My mother and father-in-law, they've been in Mathis forever. My father-in-law's been a contractor for over 50 years. Both mother-in-law and father-in-law have been active in the Catholic Church. In Sid, I still have, cousins in St. Paul. Mom and dad are still out there. I have an uncle that's been farming out there for over 40, 50 years. He's a great uncle, actually. In Taft, my mom grew up out there picking the cotton fields. She actually grew up there with her brothers and sisters. In Ingleside, I have uncles and cousins, and actually I had my grandma out there until recently. She moved to Portland with a cousin, and of course in Portland, we're there. I have a sister-in-law there that's with GPISD. And in addition to all that, I grew up and I learned how to speak both English and Spanish. In addition to that, I was raised to recognize and be proud of my Mexican American heritage. And I was taught that with hard work and determination that you can accomplish anything, including becoming judge.
Well, and the people out there are going to say, what will you do different if elected as judge? How are you going to run that court?
Well, I want to run the court in an efficient manner. I think it's important to get folks in and out of there so as to save taxpayer dollars. And most importantly, I think that it should be an objective to deter both juveniles and adults from reoffending. You don't want them in the court system. You want them to learn from their mistakes and not go on to, commit felonies.
Sam Pat's got the reputation, I have to say, as being tough on crime, especially DWI, domestic violence. A lot of people will say, your opponent for sure is going to be tough on him. Maybe she'll be too soft. How do you respond to those people that say perhaps she'll have a bleeding heart for people who may have killed somebody in a DWI accident?
Well, I prefer not to respond regarding, what I think or not about, my opponent. I can tell you what I would do.
Sure.
And that is, I think everyone deserves their fair day in court. And depending upon the circumstances, I think people can commit an offense that they should pay the price, and I will, as judge, read the laws as written and apply them accordingly.
Well, very well said. And you dodged a good curveball I threw you there. That's a good politician, because a lot of the time, a lot of people say it's your race.
Yes.
And you're not worried about your opponent. You're running your race.
Right.
Magic number to call is 549-1955. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
In case they want a yard sign, stump for you, go and believe in your goals. What's a good email to get a hold of you at?
It's friendsofmelissafdg@gmail.com. And I'm also on Facebook, and it's my entire name, Melissa Franco de Gonzales.
Well, we're going to put all that up, and we wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you.
You've got our overwhelming support, too, right here at KTMB. Your opponent's more than welcome to come on, too. We are an equal opportunity griller. We bring people on. I asked you some pretty difficult, as far as being on the bench. It's very hard for a judge. The last thing I want to leave off with is, people need to know that if you are elected judge, how do you feel about not being able to respond when the public says, I don't like the way she ruled here, I don't like the way she ruled there? Judges' hands are pretty much tied, aren't they?
That's true.
What would you do as far as, anything different than your opponent when administering justice and it's a highly publicized trial? How would you deal with that?
I believe that in comparison to my opponent, like as I said, I have a unique perspective. I'm a wife and a mother of children, and so I don't know what the trial or case would be about, but I feel confident that I would be able to handle it at that time. And and I'm open to someone who has who gives me advice if that is depending, is it a national trial, is it
Sure.
I don't know.
It's tough.
I mean, I would handle it accordingly, but it's tough to say without knowing.
Well,
For
and
sure.
there's been some other great female Hispanic judges around here. Nelva Gonzalez Ramos, she's federal, good friend of mine, federal judge now, and a lot of it's hard you're proud of your heritage and to becoming a judge, but at the same time being fair and balanced. And I commend you for running and for all the goals. Again, that's Melissa. And she is running, and let me get that to Friends of Melissa FDG at gmail.com. And also her number is coming up on there. But remember, Melissa Franco de Gonzales, and the magic number 549-1955. Get involved, jump on the bandwagon, help her campaign.